I want you to try to visualize this invisible, highly sensitized wire wrapping entirely around the globe.
Right, like a planetary nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. We never actually see it, but today we are going to trace exactly where it goes. Because it starts at like a small independent fuel station in Nairobi where the price of diesel just jumps overnight.
Right.
And then it stretches across continents, connecting to a logistics manager in Germany. And suddenly he has to rewrite his entire quarterly budget just to keep his trucks on the road.
Which is a huge headache.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
And finally, that same wire pulls tight right in your own neighborhood. It shows up as this sudden, totally inexplicable spike in the cost of a basic basket of groceries at your local supermarket.
Yeah, it's this quiet, continuous transmission of economic signals happening all around us every single second of the day.
Right. And somewhere, thousands of kilometers away from all of those places, you've got military drones and missiles lighting up the skies over the Middle East, and they are violently plucking at that wire.
Which is exactly what we're digging into today.
It is. Welcome to this custom deep dive. We're taking a really close look at a single crucial source you provided. It's excerpts from a text called The Arteries of Crisis: Oil and the Global Economy.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. And our mission today is to sort of dissect the hidden economic machinery that connects the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran directly to, well, your household ledger.
Because, modern conflicts simply do not observe borders anymore.
Right.
The structural integrity of the global economy doesn't usually collapse in a single, cinematic event.
Right. It's not a movie.
Exactly. It degrades quietly through these incredibly complex, interconnected pathways that most people never even think about until, of course, something breaks.
Yeah, until you're paying $20 for a sandwich. But hey, before we trace those pathways, we really need to set some incredibly clear parameters for you listening.
Yes, very important.
Right, because the geopolitical, historical, and military dimensions of the conflict between Israel and Iran are intensely debated, and our mission today is to step completely outside of that debate.
We're not taking sides here.
At all. We are not endorsing any political, diplomatic, or military viewpoints. We are looking purely at the cold, hard economic math.
Just the math.
Right. Our only goal is to analyze the mechanics outlined in the source text, just to understand how a localized military strike translates into a global economic shockwave.
And that distinction is vital. We are putting the geopolitical motivations entirely aside to look strictly at the plumbing of the global financial system.
So plumbing, yeah. I like that.
And specifically, what happens when someone threatens to turn off the main valve?
Okay, well, let's go straight to that valve.
Wow.
If we strip away the military alliances and look strictly at the engine of global commerce, we find oil.
Always comes back to oil.
Right. So where exactly is the single greatest point of failure in this entire global system?
Well, we have to zoom in on the map to a very specific, really narrow stretch of water. For decades, the Middle East has been the beating heart of the energy system, right?
Yeah.
But the actual bottleneck, the geographic jugular, if you will, is a channel called the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. It's a highly constrained waterway situated directly between Iran and Oman. And economically speaking, it is arguably the most sensitive real estate on the entire planet.
Wow.
Yeah. The text provides this staggering metric. Nearly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply passes through this single corridor.
1/5, just through that one strait.
Just that one.
Yep.
Carried by these massive supertankers, leaving ports in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because trying to visualize 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil consumption flowing through a single channel is just tough.
It's a massive volume.
It is. And the source uses the word artery, which is, evocative, but knowing how highly leveraged global supply chains are today, I think a better analogy is a high-tension cable.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Because, think about it, if you pinch a major artery, the whole body chokes. But with a high-tension cable, you don't even have to sever it to cause catastrophic damage.
Right, just hitting it is enough.
Exactly. Just striking it violently sends these destructive high-frequency vibrations all the way down the line. It rattles a factory floor in Germany or like a distribution center in Texas.
Yeah.
And looking at the text, Iran seems to know exactly how much tension is on that cable. They've issued repeated warnings that they could disrupt shipping if cornered.
And what's fascinating here is that an actual physical blockade hasn't even materialized yet.
Wait, really? So the ships are still moving?
Yeah, the waterways are totally still navigable right now, but the underlying mechanics of global commodity markets, dictate that the mere threat of a disruption is enough to inflict severe, measurable economic damage.
Just the threat.
Just the threat. Because modern economies run on this intangible, highly fragile resource, confidence.
Ah.
When a military retaliation or a drone strike occurs anywhere near critical energy infrastructure, that confidence just evaporates.
So they don't wait for something bad to actually happen.
Exactly. Market algorithms and institutional traders do not wait for a tanker to actually sink to adjust their models.
I want to push on that mechanism, though, because you said the oil is literally still flowing today.
It is.
So how does a psychological state like a lack of confidence or just fear actually leap out of the financial markets and physically empty the wallet of a mother buying groceries in Ohio or, a commuter in Tokyo?
It all comes down to how the futures market is structured.
Okay, how so?
Well, industrial consumers of oil, so airlines, shipping conglomerates, national energy grids, they don't buy their oil on the day they need to use it.
Right, they plan ahead.
Exactly. They buy futures contracts. They're locking in prices for delivery months down the line. So when traders see military escalation in a choke point like the Strait of Hormuz, they immediately price in the probability of a future shortage.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So they start aggressively bidding up the price of those contracts today just to make sure they secure their supply.
So the refinery buying the crude oil pays a premium today based on a fear of what might happen next month.
Exactly.
And then they just pass that cost directly to the gas station.
Without delay. And because petroleum is like the foundational molecule of the industrial age, that price hike cascades into literally every sector.
Right, it touches everything.
Yeah. An airline sees its jet fuel costs spike, so passenger fares rise. A logistics company paying more for diesel just slaps a fuel surcharge on every delivery.
Which means shipping gets more expensive.
Right. Even the agricultural sector gets hit instantly. Modern farming relies heavily on petroleum-derived fertilizers and diesel-powered heavy machinery.
Which means the supermarket has to hike the price of a loaf of bread just to maintain its profit margins.
Yeah, they have to.
Because every single step of the journey, from the tractor in the field to the delivery truck at the loading dock, suddenly costs more.
It's a brutal transmission mechanism.
It really is. And it feels incredibly punitive for the average person. Like, the source paints this really stark picture of a business owner whose margins just evaporate overnight.
Or a gig economy driver.
Yes. Someone driving for a rideshare app who suddenly has to hand over a massive chunk of their daily earnings just to keep the fuel tank full. It's devastating for families living paycheck to paycheck.
And historical data supports exactly how punitive this is. The text draws parallels to previous oil shocks.
Like in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And those consistently triggered widespread economic slowdowns, surging inflation, and eventually profound social unrest.
Wow.
But the architecture of today's global economy makes the current threat far more acute.
Why is that? Because we're more connected.
Exactly. Supply chains are infinitely more optimized and interconnected than they were in the 1970s. We operate on these just-in-time inventory models now.
Right. Nobody keeps massive warehouses full of backup stuff anymore.
Exactly. There's very little slack in the system, which means these inflationary shockwaves move with a velocity we simply haven't seen in past decades.
Let's actually expand on that idea of the supply chain. Because the source points out that the Middle East is a crossroads for physical goods, not just liquid energy.
Yes, very important point.
But I'm trying to bridge a gap here. A massive container ship full of, semiconductors or winter coats isn't an oil tanker.
Right.
So why does a localized military threat against energy infrastructure suddenly delay consumer electronics bound for Rotterdam or Los Angeles?
The invisible link connecting those events is the maritime insurance industry, specifically the actuaries working at places like Lloyd's of London.
Insurance, of course.
Always insurance. When you sail a $200 million vessel carrying $1 billion worth of consumer goods, you are required to carry specialized coverage.
Right.
So when a geographic zone becomes a hotspot for military activity, insurers designate it as a high-risk area. They then apply what are called war risk premiums.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because they don't just charge a flat fee, right?
No, they do not.
The text notes these premiums are calculated as a percentage of the entire value of the hull and the cargo.
They are, and those percentages can spike dramatically in a matter of hours.
So how much money are we talking about here?
Well, a ship operator might suddenly be asked to pay an additional $1 million in insurance just to make a 7-day transit through a conflict zone.
$1 million extra dollars. Just for
It's
insurance.
just for that one trip. So many logistics companies, that premium entirely erases the profit margin of the voyage.
So they just refuse to sail through the danger zone.
Exactly. They reroute. They send those cargo ships all the way around the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope.
Wow.
And that detour adds weeks to the transit time. Not to mention it burns millions of dollars in extra bunker fuel.
And because, as you mentioned earlier, we live in this just-in-time global economy, a 2-week delay isn't just an inconvenience, it literally breaks the manufacturing process.
Completely.
Like an automotive plant in Europe might have to halt production completely because one specific microchip or steering column component is currently taking the long way around Africa.
Yep.
And that leads directly to product shortages.
Which feeds directly into a larger macroeconomic crisis. I mean, we've established that fuel prices are pushing baseline inflation up, right?
Yeah.
And now, maritime detours are restricting the supply of physical goods, which pushes prices even higher.
It's a double whammy.
It is. And this places global central banks in a terrible position because their primary mandate is to control inflation.
But they only have one real tool to fight inflation, right? And that's raising interest rates.
That's pretty much it.
Which seems like a profound mismatch. I mean, raising the cost of borrowing money doesn't print more barrels of oil.
No, it doesn't.
And it certainly doesn't make those cargo ships sail any faster around Africa.
That is the exact core dilemma outlined in the text. Central banks cannot fix a broken supply chain.
Right.
So to bring prices down, their only option is to deliberately destroy demand.
That sounds so harsh.
It is. By raising interest rates, they make mortgages more expensive, they make business loans harder to get, and they drain liquidity out of the market.
Basically making everyone poorer so they start buying things.
Exactly. They are intentionally slowing the economy down so the consumers stop buying goods, which eventually forces prices to stabilize.
I realize I'm absorbing this in real time, but that is a terrifying mechanism.
It really is.
To counter a supply shock caused by geopolitical tension, the financial system essentially forces businesses to shrink, which leads to layoffs, hiring freezes.
Exactly.
That is the recession spiral the source is warning about. It's this doom loop where working people get hit twice. First by the surging cost of living at the grocery store, and then by the central banks actively trying to cool the labor market to fix that same inflation.
And that precise doom loop is why sovereign bond markets and institutional investors monitor Middle Eastern stability with such extreme anxiety.
I see it coming.
Right. The resilience of the global market is finite. If a regional escalation occurs, if critical infrastructure like pipelines or export terminals suffer direct damage, the removal of even a few million barrels of daily production would overwhelm any central bank's ability to manage the fallout.
Because you just can't replace that oil.
You can't. Energy analysts cited in the text project that crude prices could breach thresholds that would essentially guarantee a synchronized global recession.
Okay, but knowing that this pain is systemic doesn't tell us who actually takes the hit first. We really need to ground this in physical geography.
Yes, because it doesn't impact everyone equally.
Exactly. The source takes us on this really fascinating tour of how this plays out across different continents.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the vulnerability of a nation is directly tied to its reliance on imported fuel and the strength of its currency.
So who gets hit the hardest?
Developing and emerging markets face a catastrophic set of circumstances. Consider the African continent. When global oil prices surge, the impact on domestic inflation is instantaneous.
Because they're importing that fuel.
Yes. The text highlights a very specific example in Kenya involving matatus.
Right, those are the privately owned minibuses that form the backbone of their public transit.
Exactly. The moment diesel prices rise, those matatu operators have to hike fares just to break even.
And people rely on those to get to work.
They do. And that cascades into the agricultural sector as well. Moving crops from rural farming communities into urban centers becomes prohibitively expensive.
Which means the farmers suffer.
And the consumers. Small-scale vendors cannot absorb the transport costs, meaning the price of staple foods skyrockets in city markets.
And there is this invisible currency dynamic making it even worse, isn't there? Because global oil is priced in U.S. dollars.
A crucial point. When the U.S. central bank raises interest rates to fight its own inflation, global capital flows toward the safety of the U.S. dollar.
Which makes the dollar stronger.
Exactly. And for an emerging market, their local currency depreciates against the dollar.
Oh, wow.
So not only is the underlying price of oil higher, But the local currency they use to buy that oil has lost its purchasing power.
Brutal.
It is an economic double blow. It forces developing governments to drain their foreign reserves, and that often sparks intense public frustration and political instability.
It perfectly illustrates how globalization has forged the world into a single, highly sensitive biological organism.
All right.
Like, a localized infection in one hemisphere triggers a severe fever everywhere else. We see the immediate pain in emerging markets, but the text maps out the structural vulnerabilities everywhere.
Yes, everywhere is exposed.
Europe is walking a tightrope. Their industrial sector is still bruised from the energy shocks of previous years. Asia's massive manufacturing hubs are uniquely exposed because they rely overwhelmingly on uninterrupted imports of Middle Eastern crude.
Yeah, they need that oil.
And the United States is watching this with absolute dread, terrified that a second wave of inflation will tear through their domestic markets just as they thought they had stabilized.
Exactly.
And then there's China. Their entire economic model, which is heavily reliant on export volumes, requires those global shipping lanes to remain cheap, safe, and predictable.
Because the modern world is entirely predicated on optimization. We have built this extraordinarily efficient global machine that relies on uninterrupted, just-in-time delivery and highly predictable energy inputs.
And zero slack.
Zero slack. So when you inject a massive dose of volatility into the center of that machine, the compounding failures are nearly impossible to model or contain.
So what does this all mean? When we distill this extensive analysis down to its core, the source delivers a deeply unsettling realization.
It really does.
The nature of conflict has fundamentally shifted. Wars today are no longer constrained to physical battlefields, fought solely with military hardware.
Right.
The battlefield is the architecture of the global economy itself. The combat involves weaponizing supply chains, weaponizing inflation, and exploiting maritime trade routes.
Yeah.
Which means the front lines aren't thousands of miles away anymore. The front lines are the supermarkets in America, the public transit systems in Africa, and the manufacturing plants in Europe.
It really forces a total reevaluation of how we calculate the true collateral damage of geopolitical escalation.
And for you, the listener, the ultimate takeaway is that the most widespread consequences of this tension won't be documented in military casualty briefing.
No, they won't.
The impact is going to be felt quietly, in the rising cost of merely trying to exist. It's the friction of keeping a small business viable, the stress of heating a home, and the shrinking purchasing power of your weekly paycheck.
And this raises an important question, one that gets to the absolute heart of market psychology.
What's that?
Well, the source notes that global markets are remarkably adaptable to bad news.
Really? They seem to panic pretty easily.
They do. But if a physical asset is destroyed, supply chains will eventually find a way to reroute, rebuild, and adjust.
Okay, I see what you mean.
But what financial systems and supply chains cannot adapt to, and what they fear above almost anything else, is uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Unpredictability paralyzes capital. Right now, no economic model can accurately forecast whether diplomatic channels will cool the temperature or if a miscalculation will spark a wider regional confrontation that locks down the Strait of Hormuz.
So they're just stuck waiting.
It's exactly. The most destructive element in this entire geopolitical standoff isn't necessarily a specific military asset. It is the suffocating unpredictability of what might happen tomorrow.
That highly sensitized wire we talked about at the very beginning, the one connecting the fuel depot in Nairobi to the logistics firm in Germany and straight into your grocery cart, it is vibrating with that exact uncertainty right now.
Yeah, you can almost hear it humming.
You really can. As global leaders operate behind closed doors trying to prevent an escalation, and as the boundary between military engagement and global economic survival continues to vanish, we want to leave you with this to mull over.
Yeah.
If the friction in the Middle East continues to mount and the timeline of this uncertainty stretches from months into years, just how high of a premium will the world economy be forced to pay?